Okay, I see we have another veteran who's shown up. Sir, welcome. Welcome home. Thank you for your service. I don't want to take too much time because we are limited and we need to rush along and get the rest of our speakers, but I still want to continue on letting you know what CCTA is all about. CCTA, as I mentioned, is a grassroots, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We do not promote or advocate or campaign for any particular candidate. We do, however, identify candidates that have the same conservative values that we have based on constitutional principles, and we do that through a vetting process. Again, Hal James is chairman of that process. They vet the candidates, and then the results of those reports are published on our website so you can see how they align with constitutional conservative principles. Then you make the decision on who you want to vote for. But that's one of the processes we go through. What does CCTA do? CCTA monitors and reports on key issues to you, the taxpayer. CCTA pushes for government accountability of how our tax dollars are spent. CCTA singles out expenditures that are not in the interest of citizens for resolution. CCTA sponsors community events to inform citizens and elected officials through peaceful tea parties, educational seminars, and candidate forums. Every year prior to the elections, we will have candidate forums. All candidates are invited, all parties, independents, they're all invited to participate. CCTA fights for the Constitution because it is the law. CCTA helps to educate the public on the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and our history. We need you to help us help you. So if you're interested in joining CCTA, there are some forms over here. The dues are $12 a year. That's $1 a month. And I didn't even have to use Common Core math to figure that out. Because if I had, it would have taken me another 20 minutes to get to that point. But we'd be pleased to have you join us and help us in our efforts to get the word out and to make a difference and to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. With that said, our next speaker is National Director of the Patriot Coalition, Mr. Jeff Lewis.
I'm not short like Rick either. There should be 12,000 people here, not just 1,200. But I will say that, Thomas Jefferson said, "One man with courage is a majority." And there's a lot of men and women here that I've been working with for almost a decade that are men and women of courage, and they are a majority. I know we've had the Army up here and the Marines and the Air Force. I see they saved the Navy, saved the best for last. Actually, Patriot Coalition was co-founded by myself and an Army officer, West Point grad, Mr. Jason Rochak. I tell folks we are the best Army-Navy game in town because we're not for sale. We will not be intimidated. We will not be stopped. Several topics, some of which I've spoken to you before over the past probably 6 years. And when I look at grassroots groups around the state and around the country, I travel all over the country working with good folks. Coastal Carolina Taxpayers Association is a poster child of what true grassroots citizen activism, engagement in self-government is all about. Y'all don't see me come around here and hassle you or pester you very much about issues, and I only live 20 miles from here because y'all do such a great job. I spend most of my time in other parts of the state or other parts of the country. And we've been fighting Common Core And CCTA, I know, has been teaching the U.S. Constitution. I don't know if you've been teaching the North Carolina Constitution, but if you, some, we've forgotten. Well, I don't leave home without either one of them. And they both look a little tattered and torn, and I've had people offer to give me a new versions. And I'm like, well, my Bible's a little tattered and torn too from use. And it travels with me as well. But once you open them up, you can still read the words, and they still mean today what they meant when they were put to paper. In the North Carolina Constitution, as you're fighting this battle against Common Core, remember in our Declaration of Rights, Article 1, Section 35, and I quote, and the title of it is Recurrence to Fundamental Principles. A frequent recurrence to fundamental principles is absolutely necessary to preserve the blessings of liberty. It doesn't say it's a good idea or something we should do. It says it's absolutely necessary. And what are those fundamental principles? They're Judeo-Christian principles. Recently, been a big stink in the news over Indiana's Religious Freedom Restoration Act. I was listening to Talk of the Town one morning last week, and Henry Hinton said that ugliness that was going on in Indiana is coming to North Carolina. And I don't have the bill number, but he referenced a bill number that's similar to the one that Indiana has passed. And I'm driving down the road as I'm listening to Henry. I broke out my North Carolina Constitution just to confirm what I was pretty sure was already there. Does North Carolina need a Religious Freedom Restoration Act? Do we need a statute, a bill, a law? I pointed out to Henry in a text that morning, which I don't know if he's seen, and I've certainly not heard him speak to it since then. But so a lot of folks refer to the 10th Amendment in areas that the federal government has intruded on, that whatever was not granted to the federal government or prohibited to the states was reserved to the states and the people respectively. So in those areas that the sovereign people have given a specific enumerated list of things that the federal government is going to do on our behalf, in that area, it is a supreme law of the land. But in those areas that were not enumerated to the federal government, that were not prohibited to the states to do, this in North Carolina is a supreme law of the land. The North Carolina Constitution. Article 1 of our Declaration of Rights, Section 13, says all persons have a natural and inalienable right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own consciences. And no human authority shall, I'll say it again, no human authority shall, in any case whatever, control or interfere with the rights of conscience. Now, how much more clear will a statute lay that out? It's not possible. It's not necessary, because the supreme law of the land of North Carolina already says no human authority shall interfere in any case whatsoever or try to control my rights of conscience. I heard some great things today, and one of the things that I wanted to remind y'all of is on the back of our money. It's on the front of some of it. It says, "In God we trust." That wasn't just a boast. It's also a reminder where we should be putting our trust. It's not in man. It's not in our friends that we send to public office. It's in God, and God alone is who we should trust. When we amended our state constitution, the marriage amendment, and this is part of the slippery slope that we all fall into when we see our principles and values perverted, distorted, bastardized, ruined, or under threat by government or by special interest groups, that we feel we need to get in there and protect them. Well, they're already protected when it comes to our rights of conscience. Our right to keep and bear arms is already protected in clear, concise language in both the North Carolina and the U.S. Constitution. Don't get suckered into, because of your fears and concerns, no matter what the issue is, in giving up trusting man, trusting government in the areas that are God's, that are not Caesar's. We rendered unto Caesar, even with that state constitutional amendment about the protection of marriage between a man and a woman. When we allowed the government to get in between that holy union by having to get permission, a permit from the government to get married, you've opened the door. We the people open the door for the government to define what a marriage is. When we already knew. We've known for thousands of years what a marriage is. Now, folks who are not a man and a woman that want to call whatever type of union they have, if they want to call it a marriage, they can say that. It's not one recognized by my Creator. It's not one that either of these says, I have to accept as a marriage. That's part of my rights of conscience that are already protected. For the first time in my life, and I've been blessed this way, and so have y'all, but I actually have a congressman and a state representative and a state senator that I'm proud to say are mine. I don't agree with Walter Jones all the time. I don't agree with Senator Sanderson all the time. I don't agree with Representative Spichelli all the time. I don't agree with the guy in the mirror when I get up in the morning all the time. But in each of those cases, and I can't say this about hardly any other public servants, federal, state, or local that I work with across the country, that when these gentlemen make a mistake or are misled into buying into something that upon further investigation they find, you know what, this is not necessarily the right thing to do. They've been honest with me. I've seen the mea culpas that I messed up on that one. And they doubled down their efforts to fix their errors. This effort, Representative Spichelli spoke to it at some length on the Article 5 convention. I've been a full-time activist. I'm in my 10th year now. This is all I do. I see a lot of what goes on in North Carolina. Is initiated and started somewhere else. But the push for one world government, the push for doing away with state sovereignty, a lot of it hasn't just visited North Carolina over the years. Some of it was born here. The Federalist Institute, 1947, eventually led to, in the fear-mongering leading up to the beginning of the Cold War, an introduction of an application to amend the U.S. Constitution. There were 9 states that passed that application in the 40s, ranging from 1943 to 1949, calling for the citizens of the state and the United States to give up some of our sovereignty to a world government. And you say, well, that'll never happen here. That'll never visit North Carolina. We know better than that. It passed in North Carolina in 1949. World Federal Government Resolution of North Carolina Legislature calling on us to give up, out of fear of another world war, that we needed to give up some more of our liberty and our freedoms and our ability to make the decisions about the future of our lives. This Article 5 issue is the most divisive issue that I've seen in Tea parties anywhere, and CCTA is not unique in that. Senator Tom Coburn, who's now one of the national spokespersons for Convention of States Project, is traveling around the country, and I have a lot of respect for Senator Coburn. But Senator Coburn lied to two Kansas, a House and a Senate committee that was hearing testimony on a bill for Kansas to introduce an Article 5 application. One of the things they told the folks in Nevada, because Nevada has a provision in their state constitution that requires both the state legislatures and the congressional delegations to work toward a U.S. term limits, a congressional term limits amendment to the Constitution. Co-founder of Tea Party Patriots, Mark Meckler, co-founded Citizens for Self-Governance, the parent of the Convention of States Project, with the co-founder of U.S. Term Limits, Inc. from 1991. Many of you probably have the Convention of States Handbook. You can go to page 14 and read the bio of Mr. Eric O'Keefe, who has made a career working with the Billionaire Boys Clubs to try and trigger an Article 5 convention. Well, Mr. O'Keefe and Mr. Meckler and former Senator Coburn neglected to tell the Nevada legislature is that the U.S. Supreme Court had ruled that provision in another state, identical language, unconstitutional. Now, you would think that the co-founder of the organization that had launched that project back in the 90s to try and trigger a convention would have told his co-founder, Mr. Meckler, their national spokesperson, Senator Coburn, and others, that you can't put pressure on these legislators telling them that if they don't do this, they're violating their oath, when they fully knew 15 years ago that the Nevada Attorney General had put out a formal legal opinion acknowledging that that provision was unconstitutional. Mr. O'Keefe knew about the California Supreme Court, the 8th Circuit Federal Appeals Court, the U.S. Supreme Court in the cases in Missouri and Arkansas. I could go on and on with examples of removing their plausible deniability, that they did not know that what they were telling the legislators and the public were lies. North Carolina's Convention of States Director, Mr. Mike Falkenberry, a retired police officer from Charlotte, a month ago in a statewide teleconference, when someone confronted him about why are y'all putting all this blame on the Constitution? And I quote, and this is from one of their state directors, Mr. Falkenberry, "Nobody in this organization believes the Constitution is the problem," end quote. And I asked Mr. Falkenberry at the hearing that on April Fool's Day, the scoundrels that are trying to either trick or fearmonger or pressure North Carolina legislatures into adopting yet another Article 5 application, I asked Mr. Falkenberry after the hearing if he believes, and his constituents in Convention of States Project believe, that the Constitution is not the problem, then why are you working so hard to get your hands on it. It's the wrong solution to the wrong problem. Nick Dranius from Compact for America, and that's the bill that they have now turned up the heat on North Carolina Senate and North Carolina House to pass the Compact for a Balanced Budget. It's an application. It's more than an application. And if it was passed, because it's asking for North Carolina to enter into an interstate compact. The compact clause of the U.S. Constitution prohibits the states, except under certain very limited defined conditions, to enter into interstate compacts without the approval of Congress. If you've not read the omnibus concurrent resolution that Congress would have to pass to approve this interstate compact that would tie future North Carolina legislatures, tie their hands to make decisions as to whether or not they want to support not just a balanced budget amendment, but the specific language of the balanced budget amendment, it would codify into law and bind the hands of future North Carolina legislatures with both federal and state law. And then their hands would be tied. Why do we have the problem with Common Core, race to the top, no idiot left behind? It's because our legislatures have signed memorandums of agreement, taken grant monies, the strings that come with that money bind their hands. This isn't the federal government forcing North Carolina to do things that are bad for North Carolina, or bad for the taxpayer, or bad for business, or bad for education. It's North Carolina willingly giving up the right to make the decisions. The 17th Amendment was not forced on the states. State governments, state legislatures did not have their right to have a seat at the table, to have control over the United States Senate. That wasn't forced on them. They willingly ratified the 17th Amendment. Now when you go to Raleigh and you talk to legislators about something that the federal government is doing that's wrong, that's not an enumerated power, that's not a state issue, it's a federal issue, it's federal law. Well, if it's a federal law that was initiated that North Carolina didn't voluntarily signed on to, then who's really to blame? I have a ton of information about who's behind this movement. I mentioned the Arizona Attorney General's opinion. We have a report that we've put together called Nevada Not Bound, and one that's a little more expansive. There is over 100 years of court cases, federal court cases. Every time the state or the people have tried to impose their will in controlling or adding more conditions to the Article 5 amendment process, the courts have stricken it down. And we can agree or disagree as citizens as to whether or not the states will control, the feds will control, Congress will control, the Constitution will control, or the convention itself will control. At the end of the day, who's going to decide which one of us is right? It won't be the North Carolina court system. It won't be the North Carolina legislature. It won't be CCTA. It won't be Patriot Coalition. It'll be federal courts. Every time that has come to that head, that Congress and the people in the states are butting heads, the Supreme Court has either sided with Congress, especially as it relates to Article 5 issues, or they've stayed out of it and said it's a political question. That will happen again this time. You'll hear folks like Michael Ferris say, well, if they violate the rules, I'll sue Congress. Good luck with that, Mr. Ferris. And where are you going to sue them? In the very federal courts that you say are one of the main reasons that we need to have this convention. Their arguments are circular. The history does not support what they are suggesting could or would happen or has happened. I don't make assertions on any of these issues without first giving due diligence, as Madison said, to get into the core facts, so I know what I'm talking about. And if anyone would like more information on any of this, call me. Write me, Jeff at Patriot Coalition. You can't see this picture. This is Mark Meckler and Joan Blades. Anybody know who Joan Blades is? Joan Blades is co-founder of Move On. Talk to conservatives and Christians and Republicans, MoveOn.org. You think Soros. This is not my accusation. This is their confession, their testimonial of the grand bargain that they've been working on for many years. Some of you that have been in CCTA since the beginning may recall December 2009 when you were still meeting down in Havelock. I stopped in unannounced, fresh back from Continental Congress that We the People Foundation had organized. I handed out pocket constitutions. 3 weeks later, I was in Omaha at a National Sovereignty Symposium. And ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, publicly announced they had a plan sitting on the shelf, ready to pull the trigger. The federal government got too far out of control. Well, this is that plan. Nick Dranius, Compact for America, they have rigged this such that the co-founder, Chip DeMoss of Compact for America, his dad, Harold DeMoss, is his senior judge on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Compact for a Balanced Budget requires that any challenges to this law, were North Carolina to pass it, have to be addressed in Texas, where the Fifth Circuit presides, where the senior advisor of Compact for America is the senior judge on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. They're stacking the deck. This is from a document that they published themselves, and I quote, and they're preaching the praises of the Compact for a Balanced Budget. And they say, without this agreement in place, Article 5 would otherwise require the following legislative actions to take place. And then they proceed to list the requirements of Article 5. Well, show me in the Constitution where it says there's another means and method to amend the Constitution outside of Article 5. That a select group of states working with federal courts and legislators with the consent of Congress via the Compact Clause, that they can amend the Constitution any other way than what Article 5 dictates. It's not there. The Compact for a Balanced Budget is unconstitutional. It would automatically increase our national debt authorization by over $1 trillion right out the gate. It's been strongly suggested that the enumerated powers would be gone, that this compact, this balanced budget amendment, would authorize any spending that the federal government wanted to make. He's telling me that he's getting a hook. I have one more document I wanted to reference, and this is a bill that Congressman Walter Jones has introduced on at my request for the past 5 Congresses. When we've had a Democrat in the White House, a Republican in the White House, Democrats control both chambers, Republicans control both chambers, split. H.R. 1041, the Jamil Shaw Second Memorial Act of 2015, addresses many of the problems with our failed immigration enforcement. It is a national security and transparency bill. We need men and women of courage to help us get hearings for this bill. Right now, Craven County Sheriff, for example, has to file a report with the FBI every month identifying people that have been arrested, charged, or convicted of certain crimes, violent crimes, felonies. Every state has to do that. Every law enforcement agency, federal and state, according to the Uniform Crime Reporting Act, have to report certain crimes. All we're asking is to add nationality and legal status to those crime reports that are already being made. The bill's only 4 pages long. You don't have to pass it to find out what's in it. And if anybody'd like to read that, I have copies of that with me today as well. If you'd like to read the 1949 North Carolina application calling for an Article 5 Convention for World Government, I have copies of that. If you'd like to read the Omnibus Concurrent Resolution that ALEC has been pushing and planning for the past 6 years, at a minimum, they went public with it 6 years ago. I've got that as well. I have one nice thing to say about Senator Sanderson real quick. I spent several hours with his staff at Wednesday before last in Raleigh. And then some time with Senator Sanderson once he got out of session. And I went up there to make them sweat. But as it turned out, they made me sweat because they had me help them move some furniture. And you'll be happy to know that Senator Sanderson and his staff are not wasting your tax dollars up there, that they've repurposed some old furniture. And Norm can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I think it was a piece of furniture that was part of a bar, like where you mix drinks, in another part of the legislature up there. And they repurposed it for a bookcase in his office. Saved you some tax money. But Senator Sanderson and Representative Speciale need your support. They need your help in doing research on the issues. You know how many bills come through the House and the Senate every year? They don't have time, as much as they would love to do all the investigation and research that they need to do so they can make informed decisions. They need us. So when they ask you for your help them. Because if you don't help them and they make a bad decision or a bad choice or they get suckered into something, it's as much your fault as it is theirs. So, thanks for everything y'all do. Keep up the good fight. Keep the faith. And as my other veterans said, God bless America, God bless North Carolina, and God bless the Coastal Carolina Taxpayer Association. Thank you.
All right, once again, that was Jeff Lewis, National Director of the Patriot Coalition, and he's got tons of information there for you. If you'll see him, he'll be glad to share that with you.